So, an important aspect in terms of understanding demand and market is to understand what factors influence demand and how that affects the working of market. Rather, what are the factors that contribute to variations in demand? Yeah? To understand these variations in demand, we use a very simple concept called elasticities. Now, elasticities can be used to measure the variations in demand. Yeah? Now, what is elasticity? Elasticity is the measure of responsiveness of quantity demanded for quantity supplied. Yeah? To what? To a change in one of its determinants. Yeah? So, quantity demanded or quantity supplied responds to one of its determinants, and that is elasticity. Yeah? Okay. Let us take price elasticity of demand, because that's very important in terms of understanding demand and markets. What do we mean by price elasticity of demand? By price elasticity of demand, we mean how much the quantity demanded of a good responds to a change in the price of that good. Yeah, I repeat, how much the quantity demanded of a good responds to a change in the price of a good. Now, so price elasticity then is nothing but percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. Yeah, and quantity demanded responds substantially to changes in price. We know that from the law of demand or theory of demand. Yeah, when price increases, quantity demand falls, and when price falls, quantity demand increases. Okay. So, we can have two situations of elastic demand and inelastic demand. Elastic demand is a situation where quantity demanded responds substantially to changes in price, and inelastic demand is a situation where quantity demanded responds only slightly to changes in prices, right? Okay. Now, what are the determinants of then price elasticity of demand? Well, one determinant is close substitutes. If I have a close substitute, then when the price of one commodity changes, I might substitute that with that close substitute. So, availability of close substitutes is very, very important in terms of assessing price elasticity of demand. That is, goods with close substitutes are more elastic in demand. Second important kind of concept that we need to keep in mind is, we can classify goods on the basis of these elasticities. For example, necessities are commodities where the demand is inelastic. Yeah. For example, medicine prices. Even if the prices of certain medicines are very high, we might consume that because it is a necessity for us. Whereas, luxuries, elastic demand we notice because, well, when the price increases, we can avoid that perhaps. Yeah. So, the consumption of luxuries can be postponed. We can wait, right? Whereas, consumption of necessities, we cannot postpone. That's why it's called a necessity. So, necessities are these commodities for which demand is inelastic, and luxuries are these commodities for which demand is elastic. So, how do we compute this? Well, very simple computation. Compute what? Compute the price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand is computed as a percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. Yeah, and we use the absolute value because, you know, when the price increases, the quantity demanded actually decreases. So, you might end up with a minus sign. So, we drop the minus sign and we use the absolute value. Yeah. So, very simple kind of a computation. Percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price will give us the elasticity of demand. Now, Then you get varieties of demand curves. Yeah. When the demand is elastic, what happens? Price elasticity of demand is greater than 1. When the demand is inelastic, price elasticity of demand is actually less than 1. Yeah. And demand is unit elastic when price elasticity of demand is 1. Let me explain this concepts a little more. That is, we can have situations where the demand is perfectly inelastic. We can have situations where price elasticity of demand is 0 when the demand curve is actually vertical. Yeah. So, we have situations where perfectly inelastic demand curve, we have situations where perfectly elastic demand curve comes. So, when the price elasticity of demand is 0, when the demand curve is vertical, then we say that demand is perfectly inelastic. Medicines and things of that sort. Whatever may be the price, we will consume. Demand is perfectly elastic when the price elasticity of demand is infinite, which means the demand curve is horizontal. Yeah, very small variation in price, we might not buy it even. So, flatter the demand curve, the greater the price elasticity of demand. Yeah, but elasticity is not just the slope, but also the position on the curve, which is very important. So, I will go back for a minute. So, we have varieties of demand curve, which we can see. Earlier, we saw only one kind of a demand curve, yeah, downward sloping. But within that, we can actually find varieties of demand curve depending on how elastic the commodity is to changes in price. Yeah. So, we have demand elastic, demand inelastic, unit elastic. Yeah. Then we have perfectly inelastic, and then we have perfectly elastic demand curve. Okay. Now, let me put just one example for this. Yeah. Here is a situation of a perfectly inelastic demand curve. Yeah. In a perfectly inelastic demand curve, we find that, well, the demand is perfectly elastic. That is, elasticity equals 0. What does that mean? It means that, right, when the price of a commodity is increasing, that is, an increase in the price from $4 to $5 leaves the quantity demanded unchanged. I am buying only that much. I am not going to buy more because the price has varied, or I am not going to buy less because the price has varied. Yeah. So, that is a perfectly inelastic demand curve. Now, elasticity is less than 1 is another example that I have put up. That is, a 22% increase in price leads to 11% decrease in quantity demanded. Right. So, price elasticity of demand, yeah, determines whether demand curve is steep or demand curve is flat. Yeah. Okay. Now, so here are two examples: perfectly inelastic demand, inelastic demand. Perfectly inelastic demand is when elasticity equals 0. That is, when an increase in price leaves the quantity demanded unchanged. In the other example, we find that a 22% increase in price leads to 11% decrease in the quantity demanded. Yeah. So, one can have various examples like this. Yeah. So, we can have varieties of demand curves. Yeah. Not the only downward sloping kind of a demand curve. Yeah. Okay. Now, here is a demand curve where there is unit elasticity of demand. Yeah. A 22% increase in price is leading to a 22% decrease in the quantity demanded in this example. Yeah. And here is another example where elasticity is actually greater than 1. That is, 22% increase in price is leading to 67% decrease in the quantity of demanded. Yeah. And finally, I show that there is perfectly inelastic demand. Yeah. Where I find that elasticity is perfectly elastic. That is, at any price above $4, quantity demanded is 0. I will not buy that commodity at all. Yeah. So, at exactly $4, consumer buys any quantity. Yeah, at a price below $4, quantity demanded is infinite. Yeah, and at any price above $4, quantity demanded is 0, a perfectly elastic demand curve. Okay, so let me just recap these kinds of demand curves once more. Yeah, here perfectly inelastic demand, then inelastic demand but elasticity is less than 1. Here unit elastic demand, that is elasticity equals to 1. Here elastic demand where elasticity is greater than 1. And finally perfectly inelastic demand where elasticity equals infinity. But so far we have been talking about price elasticity. Exactly like that we can also have income elasticity of demand. What does it mean? It means that how much quantity demanded of a good responds to changes in consumers' income. Not only price, income can also change in market situations. So, it is nothing but the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in the income of the consumer. Given this income of the consumer, we can classify goods into two, that is normal goods, inferior goods. Normal goods with positive income elasticity, yeah, necessities, smaller income elasticities, luxuries, larger income elasticities, and inferior goods, negative income elasticities. I will come to that in a minute. What is this? It's negative income elasticities. Okay. Like price and income, there is a possibility of a cross price elasticity of demand. What does that mean? That is, how much the quantity demanded of one good responds to a change in the price of another good. That is, percentage change in quantity demanded of the first good divided by the percentage change in the price of the second good will help you to compute cross price elasticity of demand. Yeah. So, remember, yeah, three broad, variables: price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, cross price elasticity of demand. Now, with the cross price elasticity of demand, we can classify goods as substitutes and complements. How? For substitutes are goods typically used in place of another good, which means that there is a positive cross price elasticity. Complements are goods that are typically used together, which means that there is a negative cross price elasticity. Yeah. So, what I have been trying to tell you is that by examining these elasticities, we can actually understand the nature of good. That's a very, very powerful insight. Yeah. You can understand whether it is substitute, whether it is complement, whether it is inferior, whether it is normal, yeah, whether it is necessity or whether it is luxury. Fantastic. Yeah. Just one simple concept in terms of elasticities. And we are using it in three different variables context. Yeah. Price, income and price of related good. That's all we were actually emphasizing here. But then I have been talking only about one side of the story, that is the demand side. You can also have exactly a similar situation for the supply side. That is, you can have a price elasticity of supply where we can see how much of quantity demanded of a good responds to a change in the price of the good. Yeah, because at higher prices, suppliers would like to supply more goods. Yeah, and that is nothing but the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. And that also depends on the flexibility of sellers to change, yeah, the amount of good they produce, because all of a sudden you cannot produce certain goods more. Yeah, just because there is a change in terms of the good demand, right? So, elasticity of supply is a parallel to elasticity of demand. Now, like how we classified goods in terms of elasticity of demand, we can actually classify goods in terms of elasticity of supply. Yeah. certain goods have very high elasticity in supply. We call it as elastic supply. That is, quantity supplied responds substantially to changes in price. When there is inelastic supply, quantity supplied actually responds only slightly to changes in price. Yeah, and these are all, determined in terms of, the time period that we have in mind. Yeah, because sometimes when you have a longer time horizon, you can be little more elastic in supplying. If it is a shorter time horizon, elasticity of supply is constrained by the time period or time horizon that we are talking about. Okay, so when we compute elasticity of supply, again, like what we did in the context of elasticity of demand, yeah, it is nothing but the percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. That's positive because supply curve is an upward sloping curve. Yeah, and we have varieties of supply curves: unit elastic, elastic, inelastic, exactly like in the context of a demand curve. Now, there are two effects which we need to keep in mind when we talk about elasticities. One is called the income effect and the other is a substitution effect. What is the income effect? Income effect is nothing but a change in consumers' real purchasing power by a change in the price of a good. That is, if the price of a good falls, yeah, and if that good is a part of my consumption basket, then in effect, my income is actually increasing because I can use that money, yeah, which now is an extra because of the fall in the price of a particular good for the consumption of something else. That is the income effect that I am talking about. There is also a substitution effect, yeah, that is, well, it is basically an incentive to increase consumption of a good whose price falls at the expense of the other, yeah, but the other good now is a relatively more expensive good, yeah. So, you tend to substitute the consumption of one good with another good, yeah, depending on the price of this another good, yeah. So, two kinds of effects we notice in market, that is the income effect and substitution effect. And to analyze this income effect and substitution effect, we use these concepts of elasticities, and that is what was explained in our concepts of elasticities. So, let me summarize this whole concepts of elasticities. Yeah. Well, what we are trying to understand using the concept of elasticities is to understand variations in demand and supply in a market. In our earlier discussions, we understood that the market needs to be in an equilibrium position to have a market clearing price and a market clearing quantity demanded. Otherwise, what happens? Otherwise, there could be shortages or there could be surpluses. So, there are factors that affects demand and supply. To understand how these factors affect demand and supply, we use this very simple concept of elasticities. And we saw first in terms of price elasticity. Price elasticity measures a movement along the curve. It is a responsiveness of demand to price. Then we also saw income elasticity. Income elasticity is a shift in the demand curve. Yeah, and we also, using this price elasticity and income elasticity, we can actually classify goods. For example, a normal good is a good which has got positive income elasticity, whereas an inferior good is a good which has got negative income elasticity. That is, as and when my income increases, the consumption of that particular good might actually decrease. Yeah, and we can also classify goods in terms of necessities and luxuries. Typically, those goods which are having an income elasticity between 0 and 1 are necessities, and luxuries are goods that are having elasticities greater than 1. Yeah, and we know that necessities, irrespective of variation in price, we tend to consume either the same quantities, yeah, or perhaps marginal reductions only. So, three concepts of elasticities then become very important in our analysis of market situations. 1, price elasticity. 2, income elasticity. 3, cross price elasticity. Price elasticity measures movement along the curve. Income elasticity understands the shifts in the demand curve, and cross price elasticity examines the shifts in the demand curve. Okay. Finally, we also saw that using these concepts of elasticities, we can classify goods as substitutes and complements. Yeah, goods are said to be substitutes if their elasticity is greater than 0. That is, when the demand of particular good goes up, yeah, in relation to the price of another good. And goods are complements, yeah, when the elasticity is less than 0, that is, demand goes down as the price of another good increases. We saw examples of that, yeah, and then we can actually classify goods as close substitutes or near substitutes and arrive at a classification of goods available in the market. So, well, a very simple concept, a simple concept of elasticity then provides us very important insights into the market mechanism. The insights into the market mechanism are in terms of classifying goods into normal goods, inferior goods, complements, substitutes. And in this process of classifying goods, we need data. Data in terms of prices of goods, data in terms of incomes, and data in terms of prices of related goods in the market. If we have data relating to these three variables, yeah, that is prices, incomes, as well as prices of related goods, then we can actually analyze market, classify goods in the market, and understand what are the factors that actually determine demand in the market and what are the factors which actually causes variations in demand in the market. Yeah, so that is why these concepts are very important in terms of understanding demand.